Would you like to discover powerful ways to drive change in your organization? Would you like to learn about the latest concepts in people strategy, HR effectiveness, and optimization that will help your organization achieve a competitive advantage in your industry? Then HRBP MBA Masterclass with Ron Thomas is for you. With today's uncertain business landscape, HR leaders now play a pivotal role in what some say is a paradigm shift in the industry. This comprehensive 3-day program, in-person or virtual, will empower you to embrace a more strategic mindset, enhance your decision-making skills, and help your organization to the next level. To register as a group or individual, email us at info@strategyfocusgroup.com or visit our website at www.strategyfocusgroup.com.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is a CEO series. Our guest today is Said Sayrafiezadeh, who is a professor and author. To give you some background, he is the author of a 2-story collection, most recently American Estrangement, a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and memoir, When Skateboards Will Be Free. His writings has appeared in the New Yorker, Paris Review, the Atlantic, Best American Short Stories, and it goes on and on. He is the recipient of a Whitting's Writers Award for Nonfiction and a Cullman Center for Scholars and Writers Fiction Fellowship. He teaches creative writing at Hunter College and New York University, where he has received an outstanding teaching award. And he's a former colleague from years back. So welcome.
Thank you, Ron. Great to be here. By the way, it's morning. You can see it's morning. I'm in morning.
I see it's morning. Yeah, so we're cool. We're cool. Yeah, Friday morning. So thank you so much for being a part of the CEO series. This is our first show for the new year. So you were our inaugural guest for the first show. Wonderful. So thank you. So you've had an amazing career. So we worked together, working in cubicles and, at Martha Stewart. And over the years, I've always followed your career. And when I look to see where you are now, can you kind of walk us through that, how it evolved from that point or whatever the starting point was to where you are today?
It's a good question. And it's a tough one because you have to say, well, where does the starting point begin? I mean, does it begin when I'm a child, when I first said, oh, this is what I want to do? I've also had iterations of wanting to be an artist. My first dream was to be an actor. And that's why I came to New York City to be an actor. And that didn't turn out too well for me. I mean, I tried my best, but it just wasn't happening. But I was always writing as well. So there was kind of an organic, it's actually two things, Ron. Some of it's organic. Some of it's like, hey, I wanted to be an actor, but I'm also finding this other passion. But some of it's also the market dictates. The market dictates, Ron. And by market, I mean, I couldn't make a living as an actor. Yeah. And I realized I was having more success as a writer. So at Martha, I worked at Martha for about 8 years. And, a bunch of those years, sometimes I would leave in the middle of the day to go on an audition. And then in the latter part of my time at Martha, I would, I hope she doesn't hold this against me. I would actually, when I had some downtime, only when I had downtime, Ron, I would write. I would be at my I would write. But you mentioned the memoir. So I actually, when I was working at Martha, I sold that memoir on a proposal. So I hadn't written it yet, but I had, written a proposal for it. And that was the impetus for being able to leave Martha.
Okay. So that was kind of your out.
That was my out. That was your
out. Well, everybody has an out. So some of the outs during that time was you were kind of forced out because there were layoffs and all those kind of things that came about.
That's right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So when you think about the decisions you made, what was a major risk that you took? So I told you mine, that one day I came in and said, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
What was a risk that you took, and it either worked out or it didn't work out?
I mean, I'll tell you, one of the biggest risks was moving to New York City. That was the first. That was me. I came from Pittsburgh, which is where I grew up. So I moved to New York when I was 24. That was a major risk. That was a major risk. That was the first. That was me saying I'm all in on this. That was when I wanted to be an actor. So I said, obviously I can't. I'm not going to be able to do this in Pittsburgh. If you're in Pittsburgh and you want to be an actor, it's really only ever going to be a hobby. So I was up. I came, and the early years of me in New York were tough, because just as far as New York's an expensive city, where to live, where to work. So I would say that was probably the biggest risk. Why did that seem strange when I mentioned that? Or no?
No, I was just wondering, how that, all started, because, you said, so you were sitting around and you always had this feel that you wanted to act, and you said, you know what, I got to make a decision. So that decision is I'm going to pick up and go to New York. So when I told you mine, I was sitting there thinking one Sunday afternoon, and I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. This is why it resonated with me with the young lady who was the prime minister who resigned the other day, because I said, you know what, there comes a point in time in everybody's career when you said, you know what, I've got to make either a U-turn, left turn, or right turn, because I can't go forward. Right. And that was why I asked that. Yeah.
So mine, I think mine happened was when for me, and it's the same idea as what you're saying. It was, I've got to make a decision. I've got to make a tough decision. And as with you, no safety net.
No safety
net. There's no, we're going to give this a shot. There's no guarantee. I tell that to my students. I teach creative writing, and a lot of them want to be writers. And I will go through with them practical steps that they can take to become a writer. Because Ron, it's with the arts, and I would say specifically with writing, it's a mystery. How does one become a writer? What do I need to do? How do you get published? How do you get discovered? And so I will go through with them steps that they can take. But at the end of those steps, Ron, you got to give the caveat: there is no guarantee. There's still no guarantee. You can do all of these things. What's the saying? Many are called, few are chosen. I mean, you can do it all, and there's still no guarantee that you could have a career at this. But are you willing to still give it a shot?
Yeah. And, sometimes when you talk to people, because I was telling you about I teach a couple of college courses, and I tell students that you have to just give it a shot, because if I see you in 5 years and you're still talking the same thing about a dream, my thing is, okay, so what are you going to do? Because I heard this 5 years ago. Tell me something different, because if I see you in 5 years, it's going to be the same thing.
Yep. You're absolutely right. You got to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Because you're right. And when I left New York, when I left Pittsburgh for New York, I didn't want to be the thing the thing that I had in my head was, I don't want to, whether I succeed or fail, I don't want to be 20, 30 years from now say, oh, if I had gone to New York, I bet that would have, you got to at least try it. You got to try it. Yeah.
So to reference that, my living back and forth between the Middle East and New York, I got an email from a headhunter that said, would you be interested in moving to Saudi Arabia as the chief human resource officer? And I think about that decision, because a lot of people would have said, no, I've never been to the Middle East. I'm not going to try it. But, I use the same thought process that you talked about. I said, you know what? I'll try it. If it doesn't work, I can always come back and start over again. And that's what I did. And it changed everything.
So then, okay. But then on the flip side, Ron, we do have to be honest that sometimes there are things we don't take. There are sometimes choices we don't make. that you have to say, no, this one isn't for me?
Well, I took everything into consideration. I knew that I had a skill. I knew it was marketable. And I said, the worst thing that could happen, it doesn't work out there. I get on a flight and I come back and I get back into the job market. Right. I can find a job. Right. It may not be what I want, but it's starting all over again from scratch, because I may have been out of the system for a year and a half or 2 years. I was there for a year and a half, and then I happened to get another opportunity to move to Dubai as CEO for a consulting firm, a great place to work. And so everything worked out. So based on when you made that decision to move from Pittsburgh, I know from Pittsburgh to New York is a few hundred miles, but it was the same kind of situation.
Absolutely. And you're right. And that's also another thing I tell my students. It's like, you could make a decision now and you can change your mind later. It's fine. No one's holding you to this. You're not signing a contract. And but a lot of people there's a lot of people are anxious about that. I think a lot of young people, they feel like, oh, I got to know right now what it is I gotta know, and this is the thing I gotta be doing. And I mean, for me, and I just told you, like, I wanted to be an actor for a while, and I worked on it, and then I made a change. But a lot of my students, they feel like you gotta be all in. You gotta know it. All those steps.
I gotta see all the steps before I make a move. Life doesn't work that way.
Yes,
it doesn't.
That's
work.
Right. You're absolutely right, Ron. It does not work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Yes, that's right. You can't think. It's not a chess game. You can't be thinking 10 moves ahead. Do this move and then see what happens. Yep.
So are there still the yearnings from wanting to be an actor? Is that still there?
That's a good question. No. No, okay. I don't think so. No. Okay. It's funny, because sometimes I remember once I ran into a guy. This is when I was acting. I ran into a guy, and he said to me, he said, oh, I used to be an actor. And he said, I gave that up. And he said, but I don't regret it. And I remember he told me that, and in my mind, I went, I do not believe you. I do not believe that you have no regret. But now, from where I stand, no, I don't miss it. And I'm going to give you a couple things, because one of the things I don't miss it is because I found another thing to replace it. And this might seem odd, but with my writing, it's in my mind, it's a form of performance as well. It's not the same thing. I'm not necessarily on the stage, but it's still, it's like I get to play different characters in my writing. It's still imaginative. I'm still in a way being seen, even though it's not literally being on a stage. So there's that. And the other thing is, honestly, Ron, for me, acting did not, and I didn't know this at the time when I was doing it, but it did not allow me to be fully expressive. I was always doing somebody else's, it's somebody else's work. I'm playing somebody else's role. I'm bringing something of myself to it. But it's still somebody else's story. And I wanted to be the one telling my own stories. So again, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that that was something I was missing. But now as a writer, I realize, oh yeah, no, this is the thing. This is where I get to really say the thing that I want to say.
So would there be opportunities for, say, one of your books to become a play and eventually become a movie? Is that kind of in the thought process?
Sure. I mean, that's always a possibility. That's always out there. In fact, I am a playwright, and I've written some plays, and so I have been able to transform. It's funny. I just had a play done a few years ago, and I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to be in the play ultimately. I was like, you know what? I don't even want to be in it. I just want to be, let me just watch from the audience. I'm fine watching from the audience. That's fine with me.
No yearning to say, you know what, let me do this role. Nothing.
Okay, a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Sure, there's a little bit. Yes. But no, I think, whatever the pros and the cons, the cons outweigh it.
Okay. So how do you continue to grow and develop the craft of a writer? One of the major challenges I had, I came to Martha Stewart from IBM, and IBM was business focused. And it was the first time I had ever worked around creative people thinking and going through the creative process. And it was a while for me to kind of get into sync. I'd sit in some of you guys' meetings and whatnot just to listen, to try and get a sense of what that was about, because my background was totally different than that. So how do you develop your craft as a writer? I'm sure it's just more than say, okay, I'm finished with this. Now I'm going to write this.
Before I answer, can I ask you, so when you say it was business minded, like, what does that mean?
For me, business minded meant I'm looking at dollars. I'm calculating hourly costs. I'm looking at salaries. I give an example. Walked in on a meeting, and everybody was sitting there looking at pine cones, and they were trying to choose pine cones for the Christmas photo shoot. And this was like in June or July, and they were sitting there just turning over pine cones. And I asked someone, I said, "What are they doing?" They said they're trying to find pine cones for the photo shoot. I said, "The floor is full of pine cones." But they said, "No, we have to find the perfect pine cone." I'm like, so calculation, I'm thinking hourly rate, 5 people in the room, 1 hour. And I said, will they decide upon a pine cone by the end of the session? I said, probably not. And we'll do this 2 or 3 more times. And right away, I'm calculating business mindset.
Yes. But did that affect your business mind? Seeing that?
It did, because I said, you know what? Creative people think differently. And they may not make an impulse decision and say, okay, we got to finish this in an hour. We have to get it done. We've had 3 meetings, no more meetings. Let's do. No.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it caused me to really try and really dig a little deeper to get into that whole creative process, which was a struggle for me.
And have you found that that's impacted your thinking? Did that change your? It has.
It has, because I want to listen more. I want to listen to your thoughts as to why you're doing that. Mm-hmm. When I talk to people, just talk to me explain to me what your process is. I had someone on the show was into tokenization, with all of this new stuff coming about. And I want to listen to that and give me the business case, but walk me through, how do you even arrive at this kind of a solution, and how is it going to work? You become more analytical, trying to dig a little deeper, as opposed to making a decision right off the top of it, boom, 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 kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that was the change for me. And
then the other thing, just thinking about what you're saying is, and I don't know if this is how you felt at IBM, but in my mind, it sounds like there's a more clear cut of what's the right and wrong answer. Whereas with the pine cones, with art, not necessarily. That's the challenge. But to answer your question, the question is how does the craft evolve as a writer? And wow. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is I have to be open to what other people say. Now, listen, not everybody.
Yeah.
But being a writer, there's an editorial aspect about it that my work does need to be edited. I need to be listening to the feedback about it. That does change sometimes the way I approach my material.
Okay.
Let me see. I'll give you an example. And so I wrote a short story not that long ago. And I had a character that appeared about 3/4 of the way through the story. A new character just appeared. And then that character appeared 2 more times. Within the last 5 pages, that character came back another 2 times. And when I was writing it, Ron, I said, I feel like this, to me, this character is appearing too quickly.
Okay.
Came towards the end, and then we see the character a lot. whatever. Listen, it's my thing. I just felt like I think he's there too much.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reader is going to feel like this is I felt like I'm anticipating that the reader's going to feel like there's some sort of imbalance.
Okay.
Anyway, so I gave it to my editor. She didn't have a problem with it. She didn't have a problem with that character. It's a small thing, but for me, I went, okay. That changes whatever phobia I had, whatever anxiety I had about this I was off base. And so that's, I filed that away. I mean, it's like, I know that this can happen now. So in some ways, that's a way that my craft has changed. I'm going to give you a bigger though, example. This is back in the beginning, Ron, my writing, no humor in it whatsoever.
Really?
Everything was deadly serious.
Yeah.
The world was serious. I had to be deadly serious. You know, I was going to be an artist.
Yeah.
I had hard truths that I needed to tell. Yeah. And I wanted to follow in the footsteps of James Baldwin.
Okay.
One of my literary heroes. I don't think you find much humor in James Baldwin. But I was able to begin to introduce some humor in my work. Okay. And that really changed. You know, it's like I was able to deal with complicated topics or serious topics, but with a lighter touch. Everything wasn't so heavy-handed. So how that came about, honestly, Ron, I'm not quite sure. I mean, maybe it goes back to the pine cones. Maybe it goes back to how do you know what the right pine cone? It's a feel. It's an aesthetic. It's not necessarily one right answer for the pine cone. It's what's making these designers. It's whatever they're interested in at the time. So some of it's a mystery.
Yeah. But when I saw the final photo shoot in the magazine, wow.
What happened? Right pine cone?
right pine cone. Little did I know it was the right, because it was absolutely gorgeous. Each one on that tree kind of stood out. It was a star within itself. And I said, okay, now I get it.
And I love what you're saying, because we're getting the bystander's perspective, where you're sitting there going, whatever, that's fine. We're on the clock. And what often the audience member or the consumer, they only always see the finished product.
Yeah.
And it can look very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, of course, you just do that. Just that. Yeah, that's the right pine cone.
Yeah.
They picked the right pine.
Yeah.
We don't get the behind the scenes. You had a rare glimpse into the behind the scenes of the artistic process.
Yeah. So in writing a book, and a lot of my friends I've been bantering around with it. I've got an outline and all, but every time I look at it and I say I need to put some things together, I said, no, I'll do it later. I keep pushing it away. How do you structure? You know, when you talk about the characters here, the characters I need inside of the book, and a character, pulls out, and then the character doesn't reappear. Again, this is a creative process. How does the mind work when you're trying to put together a project and you've got multiple entities inside of that story? Each one of them carries the storyline, I'm sure, based on my reading, to the so-called end zone, which is the final product. That's huge.
Yeah. And it's not easy. And I think the thing that I think about when I'm doing it, every writer is going to be different, is I want to, maybe it's more like music for me. It's I don't want the same note the whole way. I want to change it up enough. Partly because I don't want the reader to be getting ahead of the story.
Okay.
Meaning I want them to, because that's deadly. If they start getting ahead of the story, they know what's going to happen next. They're anticipating it. I want there to be surprises.
Yeah.
enough surprise. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in a way, that's like how a song works. It's you start with a few notes, and then some different notes get introduced, and then they kind of start to combine with each other. So that's my thinking. It's I'll be writing if I have a passage. Let's say I've completed a certain passage. Well, I'll use the example I just gave about the story I wrote where the character appears. So, I'm writing, and then at some point I want something new to happen here. Something new has to happen. It can't be the same thing. I'll give you the scene. The scene is that these two people they're going around and they're knocking on their neighbors' doors. And it's almost like the way a joke is told, Ron. You know how they say like three people walk into a bar. And so you got the first two, but then the third person that's walked in the bar, it's got to be something new.
Okay.
So it's the same idea with my story. It's like we've sort of established a pattern.
Okay.
Now I want to break the pattern.
Okay.
I want to break the pattern so the reader goes, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow.
That might make it manageable. Listen, Ron, if you're just going to start working on something, maybe just think about that. Think about how do I keep it a little, okay. I'll give you, George Bernard Shaw, the playwright, he said, if you have a hurricane in one scene, do not follow it the next scene with a tornado.
Okay, you've done that.
You can't have that and then go from that. You want the variation. You want the variation. And by the way, that's where I also use humor, because if I start getting serious, and I'm all about being serious, then let's get a little bit of humor in there. Break it up. Break the rhythm up a little bit, and then you can go back to being serious.
Okay, so that's
every writer's gonna have good.
Yeah, that's a learning from, when you first wrote that first piece, it was all serious all the way through without using that breakup kind of piece to do that. Yeah.
That's right. And listen, I'm also telling you what I like. This is also what I like to consume. Those are the kinds of stories that I like to read or that I like to see in film or plays. So I'm going, if that's what I like, now let me do that myself. And that was a great bit of advice someone gave to me years ago, an artistic director at a theater. She said, look at the things that you like and figure out what makes them work. And I went, okay. I'd never thought about that before. Because I always felt also, Ron, like, I guess it's going back to the pine cones. I always felt like things just happen. Movies just get made. I didn't realize there's a thought process. I didn't realize there's an either or. I didn't realize people were deciding what pine cone to use. I just thought they just go, this, that, this, and then we're done. Movie's done. It's like, no, there's work that goes into it. It's not lucky. You're not just rolling the dice.
Yeah.
An artist is thinking about how this is put together.
Yeah. Well, I was reading an article about some movie, and it said it was almost a year in production. I'm thinking 1 year, and you look at the final product, an hour and a half that condensed all of that, cutting out scenes, and I'm thinking,
exactly.
That's a hell of a job in putting all that together. So I want to ask you this: How did you learn all of this? Was this your major in college, or are you majored in something else and came out and said, you know what, I majored in this? How somebody's a lawyer and they all of a sudden they want to do something else.
Listen, full disclosure, I'm a college dropout. I went to the university. I'm still allowed to be on the show.
No. That's cool for me. That's cool for me.
Good. No, I went to the University of Pittsburgh for 3 years, and I knew that's where I started getting into these things: acting, writing, literature. Ron, I think it's about. Listen, it's all a mystery, but for me, I think it was about just doing it, failing at it, trying again,
getting back up,
putting my work out there. Here's a major listening. Listen to what other people have to say. The worst thing for an artist, Ron, and this might be for anybody, is to be a know-it-all. Do not be a know-it-all. Be open, ask questions. I just had a class, 19-year-old student. Actually, she was a freshman. I think she was 18. And we were discussing her story. And I noticed her that she was listening to what people were saying. She was writing it down. And she said, she had a question. She said, I have a question for everybody. She wanted to know. She was curious. I told her, I said, never lose that trait. Do not lose that openness that you have. Hearing, you're curious, you're considering, you're not coming in saying, I got it all figured out.
Yeah.
That's an important thing. I'm not going to say I always had that either. I mean, I think I had to learn to listen. I had to learn to listen and be open. Because the thing, again, it's Ron, you had no idea when you said the pine cones, it was going to be perfect, the perfect analogy.
Yeah. Perfect metaphor to carry throughout, right?
Perfect metaphor. We got to title this talk the finding the perfect pine cone.
Yeah.
I mean, those designers were considering, they were open, they were not going in. I know the right one. Yeah. It's a that's the thing. It's a collaborative process.
It's a collaborative process. I do a lot of work in leadership development. I just did 2 major projects. I did one in Bangkok and I did one in Kuala Lumpur. And one of the things I always say is for leaders, because sometimes leaders, they have a fast career and they assume because their career was fast and they rose the ladder that they've got it all figured out. And I said, that's a hell of a blind spot to have, because you're going to miss out on a lot of things. And somewhere along the line, you're going to get hit in the face. Mm-hmm. So you talked about collaborate with your team, get everyone's insight, let everyone look at the pine cones and decide which pine cone to use. And that's a collaborative effort from a leadership C-suite perspective.
Yep. Do you feel like they were open to that, what you were saying?
The younger ones were.
The younger ones.
Because I'll give you an example. I was pitching another project for a major hospital in Dubai. All of the younger doctors said, oh my God, this is cool, because they teach us medicine. They don't teach us leadership skills. You know, what was the stumbling block was the older doctors, head of the departments, been practicing 20 years, 30 years. I don't need this stuff because I'm the head of the department. I've been a leader for X amount of years. That's for them. Not for me. I can't learn anything from that. That's what you have when that mindset clicks in, exactly what you're talking about.
Ron, is there a way to get them out of that? Or do you think it's just they're doomed?
No, they're not doomed, but we go through this exercise about reflecting.
Yep.
Reflecting on the meetings you had around the pine cones, reflecting on a one-on-one you had with a person that maybe it didn't go well. What could I do differently? Always look inside first before you look over here and start pointing blame to people. And when they go through these exercises, you can see the light kind of come on. So I give them a takeaway exercise to take back to their team to kind of create a listening strategy, listening to people sitting around the room. And you don't have to figure out everything. Let your people get involved and let them do it. You're going to bring them closer in doing that. And it works.
And then to add to that is to make sure, I mean, I think the other component is to make sure that you have surrounded yourself with capable people.
Yes. That's another process.
Yeah.
That's another process.
Because listen, I'll let you know, I mean, as much as I'm open to what people have to say, I also have to be very selective too, because I'm going back to my class and I tell them this, you know, there's going to be 12, 15 students in the classroom. We're going to be discussing someone's story. I say, this is an unnatural process. To have 15 different points of view on your story, for me, that would get me very muddled. I'd go, I don't know what to do. So I need to have just a couple people. I'll tell you who the 2 people are. It's my wife. Whenever I write something, I give it to 2 people. My wife, she has the first, and by the way, she's the one who's going to tell me it's boring, it's not funny, I'm confused. She'll tell me that. She'll say it right to my face. of course, I want her to tell me my story is perfect, but I got to be open to that. And then the second person is my agent. She reads my work, and then she'll say this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. Okay, I got to take it in. I don't necessarily take every note, but I got to consider it. I'm not going to pick every pine cone. I got to make sure I'm picking the right pine cone, but it's like I got to be open. I got to at least be open to the pine cones, Ron.
Pine cones. Oh man, we started something with the pine cone. You know what? Let's show this video. We got to go on commercial break, and let's show this video of your work. So we'll come right back, folks. Commercial break.
Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to say a few words about what you're going to see here today. First of all, this is not a finished play. At least not in the traditional sense of a finished play. How can a play ever really be finished, you know? How can someone's life ever be finished? Well, unless, I guess, if you die.
Oh, and by the way, can you sing with an accent?
An accent?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know any different kinds of accents?
Sure. What kind were you thinking of?
Oh, I don't know. How about Middle Eastern?
Middle Eastern?
Mm-hmm.
Or Indian, even?
Sure, that would do.
Oh, either one.
I see.
Would you mind putting this on?
I see. Under my direction, the playwright has been removed from the play.
You removed Said?
How are we going to finish the play now? It's a work in progress.
Okay, but you can't remove a character.
Oh, the character remains, ladies and gentlemen, but the person does not.
But he's the main character.
This makes no sense. Together we will make it make sense.
No, you're the hazard.
It's for the good of the country.
Sometimes I have personal but misguided and disproportionate issues with this country.
I speak the truth. You want to speak the truth on this stage? Speak the truth! Ladies and gentlemen, in 1953, the CIA orchestrated a coup. Turn that light off, please.
He
thinks he's the only one who's had a rough time of it. Excuse me, didn't I talk about black people's oppression in the beginning?
Oh, yeah. I don't think your experience is emblematic of what black people have gone through.
Any other insight you want to offer?
I mean, for one thing, you could always change your name.
That is a good point.
That's a good idea, Alan. Change it to Alan Coyne. Wouldn't even need to do this play then.
You think it's that easy? Well, it's easier than changing your skin color.
Here's the deal, world. From now on, starting now, we will never do it again to you, and you will never do it to us. We will never view war again as an ennobling contest of wills.
Well put, Said.
Wow, that's awesome.
I was
give us the backstory of that.
I'll give you the backstory right now. I wrote that play at Martha Stewart.
Really?
in some of my downtime there.
Okay.
That's the caveat. I wrote that a few years after 9/11. I was actually hey, we're going to tie it all together. So right after 9/11, I wrote a short little essay about my feelings about what had happened and being Middle Eastern. And that's where I was very heavy-handed.
Okay.
But there was somebody at the Public Theater in New York who saw that essay and then had suggested to me, what about if you try to, turn it into a play? I had no idea. Like, how would I turn that into a play? That does show some of my evolution as a writer, in that I was it's kind of funny. I mean, there's some funny stuff happening in there. I was also able to involve my theater background. They right at the very beginning, they're asking him he's auditioning the character. They're asking if he can do it with an accent. They give him a turban to put on. I mean, that was a lot of my theater experience, being called in for roles that were, stereotypically Middle Eastern. A lot of
I remember reading that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Taxi cab driver, deli owner, those kinds of things. So, and also, listen, going back to what I said earlier, as an actor, I never felt like I had full expression. And But as a writer, based on what you just saw with the play, I was able to say what my feelings and ideas and thoughts were very directly. It was the not hiding behind a role, playing somebody else's role.
Okay. Because if you were that cab driver, that deli owner, or whatever it was, you had a script to go by, and you maybe could not bring your full self into that. But when you wrote it, if you were writing that, you would have been able to write it and put those feelings of being a Middle Easterner and coming in from that perspective.
Exactly. And also, if I'm playing a taxi cab driver, I might not even believe in what I'm doing. I might not. I did things that I didn't believe in, but I did them because
this was the script.
Right. And then there's a little bit of money, and then you always feel like, well, maybe this will lead to something else. And
what part of where's your family originally from?
My dad's from Iran, and my mom's from my mom's from New York. My mom's Jewish from New York. Yeah, from Mount Vernon, New York.
I did a speech at the University of Tehran. This was years back. Yeah, wow. I did a workshop there in Tehran at the University of Tehran. I think it was maybe. Which was cool.
I've never been. I would imagine. What year was that? When were you there?
I'm gonna say maybe 4 to 5 years ago.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. A lot of paperwork to get pulled out. And you know what happened was, when I was coming back to U.S. for one of my visits, and someone saw that stamp and they said, "Why are you there? What did you do there?" I said, "I gave a speech. I did a workshop. I did a masterclass. Why are you asking me this?"
Mm-hmm.
Doing there? What are you?
Well, that's interesting because that's I've never been, because the problem for me is, if I wanted to go, they wouldn't issue me a visa because they consider me to be a citizen. And because of my dad. And even though I was born in the United States, Iran considers me a citizen. So the only way I could go to Iran is if I had a passport, if I had an Iranian passport.
I see. Okay.
So I'd actually have to have dual citizenship.
I see. Okay. Have you ever considered that?
For like 2 seconds. I mean,
okay.
About 2 seconds. The other thing is, Ron, for me, if I went to Iran, I would listen. I don't know anymore, but when I was younger, I technically would have had to serve in the military. Okay. So that made me even think about it less than 2 seconds.
Okay, less than 2 seconds, right? Yeah.
So you have an easier time of going to Iran than I do.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of people. There was a lot of people. Yeah. I did a project with a telecom, one of the major telecom companies that were located. MTN Arancel, I think that's the name of it. That's the so-called Verizon, the ATT in there. And I worked with their human resource department for like 3 days and gave a speech one day, workshop 3 days, and I flew out the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like quite a trip.
It was cool. So in looking back over your career, as we begin to close down here, so what would be one of the major lessons you've learned in coming from Pittsburgh to New York, acting to playwright to author, professor? Major learning lesson.
I mean, a lot of it we've said about the. Being open. Also, you cannot script your career. You can try things, and some of those things don't work out, and then you got to call an audible. Yeah. I would say another thing is discipline. You know, the business model for being an artist is that you don't really have a boss. You have to be your own boss. I don't have an office that I show up to. Yeah. I don't have anybody. I don't have deadlines. I've got to create those myself. Yeah. So that takes a considerable amount of discipline because it's I have to generate everything. You know, when I worked for Martha Stewart, I knew what time I had to be there.
You knew there was a check.
What's that?
I said, you knew there was a check coming twice a month, so you took care of it.
That's right. Check coming twice a month. That's right. Here's my desk. Here's what I have to do. Here's when I clock out.
Yeah.
Here are my days off, all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a transition to go from that kind of structure to the fairly unstructured world of just being a writer. And then it's like, well, I have to be my Martha Stewart to me. Here's what needs to be done, and I've got to get it done.
Well, you know, when I hear people say, "Oh, I want to own my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur," and I'm going like, "Yeah, right." You don't know half of the deal you have to put up with. So when you talked about you're in charge of everything, you're the CEO of you.
That's right.
And if you think of it in terms of that, you've got to do everything. Whereas when you work for a company, you had the office, you had all the perks that went along with that, and you were guaranteed once a month or twice a month that money was going to come in. But when you're on your own, you got to make it come in. And if you don't make it come in, it's not going to work over a period of time. It's going to fall to pieces.
That's right. Yeah. So when those people say to you, "Oh yeah, I want to own my own business," and you go in your head, "Yeah, right." What is it that what do you think they don't know?
Well, they have an idea, but from idea to execution, there's a whole lot of work that goes into that. So my question normally is, so what are you going to do next? So you got the idea. What is your thought process in trying to put all this together? Have you developed a timeline? What do you need to do now to get to this point of even getting started? Because lots of times it's just the idea. And so many people, it's just the idea. So my thing is, so what's next? Okay, you got the idea. How are you going to make that come to fruition? Walk me through those steps. And the vast majority of time, they can't give the steps because they're still in idea mode. You know, you talk to people 5 years later and they're still talking about the same idea. It's kind of the same thing.
I had a conversation this was with one of my graduate classes, and they were saying, when's the money come? When's the money? When do we get paid? And I said, Ron, well, let's use this analogy. And I think it can go straight through. I said this, if you wanted to start a shoe business, what would you need to do? What would you have to do to make that business successful? And here's the problem. When people deal with the arts, and I'm going to blame college a little bit for this, Ron. Mm-hmm. Arts, it feels like, oh, this is, it's sacred.
Yeah.
We don't want to mix money and the arts. And by the way, if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But if you want to have a career, you have to think about that. Yeah. And one of the things you got to think about, just the way the shoe salesperson thinks about it, you have to create something that somebody wants. You have to create a product that somebody wants. They have to want to buy it. They have to want to buy it. Yeah. And by the way, that when you go back to one of the lessons that I might have learned is as a writer, it's not only what I want to write. Mm-hmm. As much as I say, I got to tell I'm going to just, how much I like it better than theater, than being an actor, because there's still a component of compromise in it that I have to be thinking about and that's partly why I have introduced humor. It's not so cold-blooded like, if I put humor in, I'll sell this piece. But I have to think about what does a reader want to enjoy reading? Yeah. You got to create something like, it can't just be you're all in your head and it's all about you. And it's so funny because I actually know somebody who's creating a shoe. They said, I'm going to create a shoe. I play basketball with them, Ron. They said they got tired of spraining their ankle in playing basketball. They said, I'm going to create a shoe where you cannot sprain your ankle. And then they went out and they did it. They created a product that they thought the market would want, someone might want to buy, and then
based on a need.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly right. Yep.
So you talked about college, and this is the last question before we close. And I find this a lot with students. colleges, we give them all of the skills of business and art and creative, but the vast majority of time, we don't talk about careers, next step. How are you going to succeed in doing this? We don't talk about the so-called afterlife of college and getting out and going through the process of even finding a job, and how do you build a career? How do you decide? None of that's discussed. It's all the book stuff, the theoretical stuff. And in my courses that I teach, I always will spend some time talking through that, because just because you have an MBA, it's 1,001 people knocking on doors got MBAs that's trying to find work. You're no different. What's the need? How are you going to sell yourself differently from someone, all the other 20 people in line with an MBA?
And so for you, is that the key? What makes you different?
So I give an example. Someone was applying for a job as a CHRO that I coached through yesterday, and they was all excited about it. I said, so what's going to be your pitch? Well, I've been doing HR for no. What's going to be your pitch? What is the need for the people sitting on the other side or on the phone? What are they looking for? Who's the client? What's the challenges of the industry? How can you bring solutions to that? And that's my thought process, is that because we can have all the things, certifications, all the things, but can you do the work that the client is looking for? So I flip that. How do you sell the shoes? Because there's a need, because other people have sprained their ankles. Yep. And that's my thought process. And this is how I coached her. And I can see when I was talking to her, it was totally deer in the headlights. She wasn't getting it. But you know what? Yeah. So that's the deal for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's similar. It's similar with my students. What book do you want to write? Okay. Has that topic already has somebody already written that book? Because listen, I can be naive myself. I'll sometimes hear a very interesting. Someone said, "Oh, I'm writing a book about this." I go, "Wow, that's so interesting." I'll tell my agent, "Hey, I have a student who's writing a book about this." My agent will say, "Oh, yeah, there 2 books came out
already
like that." Now, maybe there's a way that they're going to have an angle on it that hasn't happened before, but you got to be aware what's going on in the market. That does not happen in college, Ron. It didn't happen when I was in theater. I'll tell you what exactly. When I was in college, first of all, when I was in college doing theater, and I know we're going to end, but I guess when I was in college, first of all, the resources we had, Ron, amazing resources. And in my mind, I thought, oh, this is how theater is always going to be. You're going to be working you're going to have the set designer. No. Yeah. When you come to New York, you're working. I was doing theater in a holes in walls. The other thing was, and I don't know if how someone would say this to me, but with full candor, my name is going to set me up for a very difficult theater career. I am going to be stereotyped. Mm-hmm. What I said before, going out for taxi cab, deli, it was a shock to my system. Yeah. I was not prepared for that. I thought, because when I was in college, I was doing ethnicity never played a role, literally or figuratively. I would do any kind of, in college you get cast in anything. Yeah. I thought the same thing was going to happen when I got to New York. I was like, what are you talking? No, I'm an actor. No. I met with an agent once, and she said to me, you have to change your name. She said, if you don't change your name, the only thing I'm ever going to call you for is terrorist. That's what she said to my face. Now, that made me mad. Ron. But guess what? She was being honest. Yeah. She was telling me a truth that nobody had told me before. And then it was up to me to make the decision. And my decision was, it's not worth it for me to change my name. I'm not going to do that. I don't want this bad enough. I don't want this bad enough.
Kudos to you, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. This was awesome. And I knew it would be awesome. Big fan of yours, following your work over the years, and former colleague from years and years back. So thank you so much, man. Hang on for just a second as we close out.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.